Hey guys, and welcome to a new video. Today we're going to take a look at an existing feature called external request, which allows you to make connections towards a third-party platform. But there are some features inside of this action node that not everyone might know and can really improve how you manage the external request, but also work a little bit more efficiently. And in this video, we're going to show you a few live improvements inside of the action node itself. So first of all, you can go with an external request by going towards an action node and then the advanced actions. Once you've done so, then the first improvement that you might already do is add a route. And a route means if the response code starts with a certain number, right? Because if we take a look inside, if we do an external request, at some point we get a response. And the response code is always something like 200, 201, maybe 431, 430, 520, 521, and so on and so on. So by mapping these response codes, it allows you to map proper error handling as well. So with this, I mean, if we go with a route, and let's say if the response code starts with a 2, for example, then every response code that comes with a 2 basically means that it's a 200, 201 response that is a successful API request. That means that the flow can continue as you intended to. So you can go towards a send message node, you can go towards a go to block, condition step, however you like to. If we have another route, for example, a code that starts with a form, that means that there is something wrong with the specific external request. And then you can, for example, say, okay, I'm going to notify a system admin that this external request for this user has failed, right? So you can do so by going with an action node. You can go with a notification. You can write the notification, and inside that notification itself, let's just do a live agent notification, for example. You could say user just went through this API request and it produced the following error. And then we can basically go with the system field lost error. So if we go with lost error, then we can go with the lost error, and then we can say we're going to only map the specific error, right? And just like that, you have a fallback system where you set up a notification whenever an external request fails. Now, of course, you need to take into consideration if you do this on a massive scale, like with a broadcast, this might not be the correct way, because if during the broadcast the external platform, so the third-party platform, has some kind of outage, you will get countless notifications that way, right? But just to show you a possible route in case an external request fails, that you could, for example, send an admin notification or just an email, right, towards an admin to take a look, or any way you might see fit. So that is one of the things that a lot of people skip inside the external request, the ability to route the response codes. So for each response code, you can have a separate route. Now, if we go inside the external request itself, and let's say we have a certain domain, right? And I'm just going to go with the dummy domain, let's say maindomain.com. And then we would have maybe some parameters inside of the URL. So let's say we are going with a name equals 2, and then you will have, for example, first name. And then we have another one, let's say email equals to, and then we will go with email, right? This might cause certain failures, because if you have a wrong character inside of the URL parameters by adding them each and every time, then you might cause some issues. So you can actually skip all of this. We can just remove this. And instead, we can just go with the base URL and of course the extension if you have that, right? Like get or create, let's say subscriber, for example. you can use the tab URL parameters. So if I say name, I could go with the value will be first name, and as a test value, I could, for example, say Mark. Same for email. I can say email is the parameter. Then we will go with the email as a system field, and then we could have a sample value of the email inside. Just whenever we want to test this, we need to have sample values because custom variables are not loading during a test phase. This is only pre-filled when the user actually goes through the flow itself. But this is also much cleaner, right? And it also prevents you from setting up wrong characters inside the URL itself, just using the URL parameters. And we will append all of these values towards the URL, which makes it much easier for you as a whole. And it's also a much more structured way, right? Because a mistake in the URL itself is easily made. And here you have a much cleaner look. So that is another thing that a lot of users skip by just adding everything inside the URL itself. Well, that is not really needed. Another one is that API keys, when you need to insert them, usually go with something like authorization, and then you might have a bearer key, and a bearer key will then go something like this, and then you will add your API token here, right? A lot of the time, users also skip adding this bearer. So instead of using the header to insert your API key, you can also consider, by going towards the authorization tab instead, go with the dropdown, and then you will have different kinds of authentication. Maybe some external requests don't require one, right? And you don't have to set up anything. But you could also have a basic authentication that goes by username and password. You could also have a digest, which is pretty much the same values that you will need to fill in, but it's a different kind of authentication. But we also have the bearer token, where you then don't need to also add bearer, but you only need to insert the API token here, which is much more convenient than doing it inside the header, where you first need to set up an authorization section, then you need to go with bearer, and then your API token, right? You can skip all of this by just going towards the authorization tab. And then from here, just go with the bearer token option or any authentication option that you might have. And then just fill in only the API token that you have. That is it. The rest will be handled in the backend when making the external request or the API request towards the third-party platform. So the last option is inside the response tab. And sometimes you get data back from a third-party platform, which is a little bit big or unformatted, and however you want to put it, it's not really directly savable inside of a custom field. It might, for example, exceed the 20k character limit for JSON fields, or you want to reformat it any way you like to. So you can enable what is called data pre-processing. So once enabled, you get a JavaScript-like environment where you can now format the data that you receive. And as you can see, the function by default has payload, meaning that the response that you get back is considered the payload, right? So for example, if you only want to return certain values from the payload, and let's say that's only the email or the name, or you want to remove something, right? Or you want to add something instead, you can use the data pre-processing if you are efficient enough to handle JavaScript. You can also load in different kinds of libraries that basically the same libraries as that you have inside of the JavaScript node. So if you are a little bit more proficient and advanced, you can also enable data pre-processing to format the data any way you see fit and save it afterwards inside of the desired custom fields. So these were just a few options inside the external request that can make your life much easier when working with third-party API requests. If you have any questions, as always, we are there for you and we will answer them as soon as possible. But for now, have a great day, take care, and talk soon.